So, with that, each one of those stages of growth requires a different leadership focus. We talked about that previously. Just like to recap those really quick, and then we'll dive into the new stuff for this session.
So, so David, we spent a lot of time talking about this, and the cool part is as we go through this, we've kind of got two really different visuals that will kind of show people
Right.
uh, what this kind of looks like. And so, in this first one, when you're starting up, right, it's like the two guys on the side of the screen. Hey, I can build a job. I just need to find somebody who's going to pay me to build it for them. So I go out and I get work, and then I go and I build that work, right? So I get it and I do it. There's a shortness to the negotiation. There's a shortness to the one job, and the cycle looks fairly simple because again, all we need to do is figure out what we're going to build and find somebody to pay us to do that. So that's usually what our stage one contractors, right? Where you've got kind of the five people. Um, Heck, that's what it felt like on some of my first projects. Now, granted, was working for a stage six company, but it felt very much like stage one because it was myself and now it was self-performed. So we probably had 20, 30 people in the field, but the job was being run by three of us. And we were doing whatever whatever it took to get it done, showing up in the morning, making sure the asphalt plant was ready to go, that the truckers were in line, that we had the temperature was 50 and rising, so that we could get the asphalt down. But yeah, it was three of us, and we just kind of took care of managing all of that stuff. We didn't worry about the next job until that job was done. So it very much is that stage, right? Of
Yep.
hey, who's got a hand that I can shake, that I can build their work for them. So
And I love that you brought that up because that's an excellent point. That that doesn't change. That when we're talking about the leadership focus, and yeah, that always has to remain in the business as a foundation. We're talking about the very top leadership focus. So the the CEO of
okay.
Kiewit at the time was their job was to make sure that you were focused on this at the level that you were at. They
Right.
were probably focused on something completely different at that point in time. They were focused on what does it take to go make sure the next Sue gets recruited, and the next, whoever the area leader was, gets recruited. So anyway,
Yeah.
okay, so perfect, and so we're building on that now. So next stage is
Yeah. So the next one now is you get a little bit bigger, and now you can't build it all yourself, right? So now it's a matter of we have to find others. We have to teach them how to do things, the culture that we want, the way that we want it built, how we want to store some of our materials or reusable items, things like that. We have to teach them what it is we want them to know. And we have to trust them to do it. And then you can go out and do those, two or three jobs at once, because again, the leader cannot be at all places at the same time. So they have to find the people, they have to teach the people, and they have to trust the people. And that's why, just even in the triangle, right, the get work and do work, you absolutely have to have that or you don't pay any bills. But all of that getting work and doing work is done by the talent that you have around you as things get bigger. And that's why the build talent is really the top of our pyramid. You need the base of the work, but you really do need that top piece of the pyramid to be able to build that work. And even talking about sustainability or scalability, you have to have those people there. I mean, I've been on those jobs, or been in an area or a district or a region, and you can immediately tell when they're trying to grow, but they're just getting more work and
right.
not building up the talent bench before you get that work. And it can be painful to watch. So, and this is like you said, David, that I was with a stage six company. So while I'm doing this, Yeah, I've got higher up, many levels above me looking at, okay, what kind of talent are we going to need for this job that's going to be 3 years in the design build stage before we even start to build it, right? So they're thinking um, some number X bigger than I am. But this is just building that foundation of knowing that you need to hire, knowing that you need to teach, and knowing that you need to trust. You're going to do that at all levels. The first level is always the hardest. It was for me anyway.
And I think at this level, the big word is the really big word on this is the trust aspect, because at this stage, when you're if you're looking back at this stage from like the example you just described in your own career, if you're looking back at this stage, it's very different. There was a trust that was there, but there was also a program in place that knew exactly what they needed in those particular roles. There was selection criteria for those. There was kind of competency certification. There was training programs in place. There was all those things. When you're progressing through startup and into this stage, you're literally you're trusting somebody. You're saying, hey, I worked with so and so, I know that they can go run a good job. And your definition of good job is just that. It's good job. You don't, you say, well, what does that mean to you, Dave? And I'm like, I don't know, but I know that they can do it, and you are trusting them. And that is really hard. And we'll dive into this further, but trust and communication are very often misused words because they're misunderstood of what all the different dimensions are. But at this stage, it is heavily about trust. You are trusting their good intentions towards you, and you're trusting in the capabilities with your limited ability to select and train. So there's a lot of trust that goes on at this stage.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so now we
it's
move
hard.
forward a
It's
little bit.
hard.
So now we move forward a little bit. Now what happens?
Well, and just like you said, right? You've got to trust people that they are going to do what you believe you've communicated to them, what you believe they understand, and eventually we will. Actually, I think it's in our next series. We will talk a bit about those quantifiable outcomes that come with roles and people inside the organization. But here, if we look at the next thing, right, is okay, you've gotten to the stage where you've hired more people, you're beginning to trust what those people are doing. Now comes the repeatability uh, of those operations. How consistent can we get these things, right? Because you're no longer just managing yourself, you're managing others to do what you were doing. You're trusting those others to do what you were doing. You are now looking for those consistent and deliberate outcomes time after time after time. And you have to have some sort of reporting. You need to have some sort of metrics. There's some sort of way that you are going to measure what's happening. Is it consistent? And how do you look at it when you've got, just like this slide says, right? You've got customers who are not consistent. You've got suppliers and people. Some people are more consistent than others, and the changing market. And we all know, again, like what COVID did with prices, our material prices. How do you look at consistency and how do you measure that? Because there's no matter what you're going to do, there is a keep score uh, piece to any project that you're going to run, to any organization that you're going to run, because you've got to have some consistency. People need to know what's expected. They need to know how to measure it. And then they need to know how they can make it, just a little bit better every single time. So we had, regular, we called them a job cost report summary. And well, David, you and I were kind of dissecting it the other day, and it has these four different squares of information. One is all about how are you doing against your budget. Another one is how are you doing based on your original margin. It has your new margin gone up or down. One is about cash flow. Where does your cash sit? And another one was about here's the actual money that's going to go into the bank when you're done. And interesting, right, is when we're looking for those consistent outcomes, you can see somebody's making something up in one of those squares because it pushed the other information into, this makes no sense, right?
Right.
But it was a consistent reporting tool that helped us to get to those better outcomes. So that's where we get kind of the keep score, and you're starting to introduce some technology, things like that. So and David, you've probably seen a lot of those
Yeah.
types of things as far as what helps to get to a consistent outcome for a lot of different companies.
Yeah, I was smiling as I was thinking about you and I working through just even some of the vocabulary and the differences, and
Yeah.
how many of what you would call just best practices principles for running a business that without knowing, I guess, all right, well, I guess they knew, but I mean, we're all just baked into that four quadrant report. And what I was thinking about was, on when you first get in, I mean, when you're coming out of stage one and stage two, you're probably going to the CPA down the street or the bookkeeper down the street to
Yeah.
go put together everything. You're putting stuff together, once a year at best, because you got to pay taxes. Maybe even not super consistent on that. And the time you get to stage three, you now are looking at it. You probably had to get a line of credit. It was beyond just a signature line of credit. They're asking you for information. You had to go get bonds for projects, and they're asking you for information on that. And what really was, when we see contractors going through this stage where there is so much going on because they've kind of deferred a lot of those basic administrative functions for so long while you're going through startup, and you should, because there's a finite amount of resources. We'll talk about this later, just as far as putting together any change that you do in the company for improvement. It's a finite amount of resources, so you've deferred these things, and now they're here, and it's really easy to fall into reactionary mode. And what I mean by reactionary mode is, if you want to find out who all your friends are, just stop paying your bills, because everybody will call you. So your employees will call you. If you don't, miss payroll by 1 hour, and you will find out who all your friends are.
Yeah.
Don't pay a vendor, for a few days, and so they're going to be calling. Don't file this report with one of the dozen different government agencies that's going to be asking you for different reports and things like that, and they're going to be calling you. So it's easy to go fall into reactionary mode for that. Oh, and by the way, the administrator, role for this size company is also the IT manager, is probably the purchasing manager, is probably the, go grab the mail manager. They're literally doing everything. They are, well, just like your role, they're the business manager.
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
they're managing all of the back office functions of the business. The owner is out doing their best to get work, do work, and get some talent in to go do it. And it's a lot less of building talent at this stage and more of getting talent. And so I think, what's important, where we see that a big benefit, is to start to force the proactive nature of that administrative function, which is in the keep score function, which is a lot what you touched on with that reporting. So starting to put a solid work in progress process in place at this
Right.
point in time, solid project projection, just getting going from, we got the estimate, how much did we plan to make? How are we going to track that as we go along? It seems really simple, but it takes up time. And it's really hard to go create the time to go do that when you're running and gunning. But somewhere as you move through stage three, you start to get those systems in place. If you don't, you're creating a massive debt load that will come home to roost way into the future. And that debt,
Yeah.
will start out, you won't even notice it. It'll start out as process and culture debt. And then it will grow and grow, and it will turn into financial debt sooner or later. Just maybe not in this year. So that's what really struck me, is when you were describing that. There's a guy down the hall that has a business, and he had said that. He's like, "Yep, if you ever want to know who all your friends are, just stop paying your bills for a month, and everybody will call you." So, but who doesn't call you? Your customers rarely call you if you do not
Yeah.
submit your change orders on time. If you do not submit the bill on time, if you don't call them proactively to find out where payment is, they rarely call you. I don't think I've ever received that call from a customer like, "Hey, just wanted to let you know, yeah, that AR I owe you for that project, I'm going to be about 1 day late, but I'm going to get it in the mail right now."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you never get that. So that's where you've got to be proactive, and that's where, from a leadership focus, you have to shift your focus to being proactive in these areas. All right, so now we're moving past stage three, moving from 50 to 150 people. What needs to change?
Well, it's I look at it as, kind of stage 1 and 2 are kind of the envelope stage. Stage 3 is now you've got your receipts in a shoebox. And you're hoping that as you're driving along with both windows down, that the box doesn't come open and there's receipts flying everywhere, right? You're gathering up information. You're starting to look at the consistency of those operations and how you do that. But when you get to the level 4, right, and you're really looking at being able to scale, right? What does it mean to scale? Well, it means that you've got basically alignment through the organization, that you are, you know where you're going to go next. You've got the processes to support it. You've got the technology to support it. You've got the tools and the people to support it. And that if you're in several markets or several regions or, several states away from each other, that there's consistency across the board, right?
Right.
Everybody's kind of doing the same thing. So this is where, you finally taken all the receipts out of the shoebox and you've put them into, the system that can now help support that. I, I look at scalability. I guess if I had to take one word about being scalable, I would say it's probably projecting or forecasting,
Mm.
right? Because when you get here, you are very much looking at uh, aligning people is aligning everybody that's around you, but it's also looking forward. Because if I am now truly scalable, I probably am looking, are my processes big enough for the next place I want to go?
Right.
Leadership is seeing it as, hey, we got this, right? We got this. But they're also looking at, can our technology take on the next thing? Um, and I'll tell you, again, worked for a stage 6 company. Very interesting is we got to a point where we were too big for the technology that we had. It was bolted on. We had many, many systems that were bolted together. They didn't talk well with each other. And it was a huge uh, move to change technology. But we knew even as a level 6 company, stage 6 company, it felt very much like we were a level 4 because we were having to go through and look at our technology and our processes, what's working and what's going to cause us issues as we want to grow again.
Right.
So a lot of it was looking into the future and seeing what is that, but even as you know that you're a scalable company, you know that you've got that foundation, you can see that again, you're going to get work, you're going to do work, you're going to build the talent inside that. You're going to have those consistent processes that you can keep score with. And you know that you've got processes for, through technology, what's going to support the things that you do, and that you've got a good handle on the things that you're going to need, the tools, the materials, even the subcontractors, whatever you're going to need to be able to build that next project, that next market, that next geography, right? That you're kind of all in and see it across, right? It's not just, it doesn't just look up, but it is across.
Yep.
Everybody gets it, right? And we were great at
Yeah.
that. We were great at that. So others maybe not so much. I'm sure sure you've seen some of those.
Well, when that's I love how you started out with saying that scalability is about projecting. You're projecting into the future, and you're saying, what are my needs going to be? And probably at this stage, into the future is in that 2 to 5 year time span when you're at this stage, because that's about the time horizon that you should be paying attention, looking forward, and creating, making sure that your managers and your systems are and your strategies are really there to go support that growth. And that's an ongoing thing. you talked about, you were probably what, 30,000 employees or something when you were talking about the technology. It's an ongoing thing. You will
Yeah.
never buy a piece of technology or create a system or have a leader in place that's good for all of eternity. Just isn't going
Right.
to happen. No different than a piece of construction equipment. And from a leadership standpoint, you're making constant decisions. Steve on our team, who spends a lot of time working with the technology and helping contractors on that side of it, just calls it, it's technology debt. I mean, that's all it
Yeah.
is. And I mean, probably the in current time in 2023, late 2022 timeframe, the Southwest, their leadership made a definite decision to take on some technology debt. I mean, it's not like they didn't know that those systems were had the possibility of failure, the failure that happened over the 2022 holiday season. But that's and everybody writes about the failure, right? So everybody's gonna, this is the tough thing about leadership is everybody is gonna shoot arrows at you when, if you deferred that decision. Everybody would shoot just as many arrows if you decided to go invest, probably the $250 million or so that would take to upgrade those technology
Yeah.
systems, and knowing that at least those were, they had some problems in them, but the new upgrades and the new technology and everything comes with all kinds of its own problems, right? So the arrows will be shot at you, if you when you make that decision, they would be shot at you that time. They spent this much money and it really impacted all of our bonuses, and look at all the
Yeah.
glitchy problems we have, and it's doom, 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 and failure. So these are hard decisions that have to get made at this stage of growth, and this is something we'll definitely talk a lot more. This is where the contractor business model helps you see the business and helps you prioritize these, helps you quantify the cost of doing nothing. Kind of take, that's a term from one of our team members, Courtney, the cost of doing nothing, which is, you're taking on some debt, and what's the cost of that, as compared to acting now, and what are the resources required and the priorities. So yeah, I love the way that you described it. It's forecasting into the future and saying, what must I do to create predictable outcomes, because predictability is huge. So
Yeah.
all right, with that, so now we're moving from, say, the 150-ish person size to the 500 person size.
Yeah. And just, I think about, the scalable foundation, right? You have to be able to look into the future, at least think about the future. You get to stage 5, right, where you are ready to scale. That is all about uh, not just projection; it's about succession. Because projecting can be projecting out your needs for technology and your materials and your people. Succession is all about who are your next people in line, things like that, and all of that is really about aligning the whole team so that we are all looking at the same, North Star, that this is the mission of the company. This is the company's vision. These are the values that we think and feel. And we have communicated clearly our strategy for where we want to be, and that everybody understands how their role is aligned to all of that mission, vision, value. If we can do that, and really when you're ready to scale, it gets to be about having everything, all the systems in place. But it really is about kind of the pipeline of talent, the pipeline of technology, the pipeline of materials. It's all about kind of, moving through one to the next. But the only way you continually move through there is, again, if you're looking at the leadership side of this, it is all about the clear, transparent, and frequent communication of those values, of that vision, of that strategy, because, to help people see where we're going and help that talent to stay, help the talent to regenerate. But it's, the clear understanding, we talk about this all the time, right? That the communication has to be so clear that it's impossible to be misunderstood, the people you're hiring, the people that you're moving up, they have to be absolutely on board and aligned with what the values are and long-term strategy. They can talk the talk, right? They've got the lingo. They know where we're going with this. The message, the communication has to be so transparent that it can be trusted, right? We go way back to
Right.
the stage two, right? You are trusting people. These people need to trust leadership and really trust the fact that the message being said is true. And then it's got to be set at a frequency. All of this is on the receiver, right? It's got to be set at a frequency that the receiver gets it. Maybe that's once, maybe it's twice, maybe it's three times. But this is where we really do have to get those things across. And in doing that, this is it, and it's interesting because in our next series, we're going to talk about the talent value stream and why we look at it as like this talent pipeline, that you have to plan for the people that you want. You have to plan for the numbers that you're going to need. You're going to have to plan for where they are in your geography, what markets they're going to be working in, how you recruit and hire people, where you get them from. Again, how many, what time of year do you need them? We look at the onboarding. How do we make sure that people have their perfect first day? I know many people that didn't, and they remember that, right? But how can you onboard them so they've got the perfect first day and they really really understand what the organization is like? And then how do you keep them, right? What does retention look like? It looks like training. It looks like professional development. It looks like leadership development. It looks like succession planning. And then, most people don't really think much about it, but offboarding, right? How do you help people step away and not lose that knowledge, that institutional knowledge, and not lose that mentorship opportunity, all of those things. So that cycle just continues. And if you don't have that in a regular system as to how you're going to keep the people and all of the things around them, you're not ready to scale, right? You're just not if you don't have all of those things. Most of the time, we just look at, hey, yeah, we need, 22 people in this next year. Yeah, but to do what, and how are you going to get them there, and how are they going to stay? Otherwise, you just can't get bigger. You can't get to the 500 person realm if you're trying to get from 150 to 500. It's all about the people. So
Yeah, interesting though. So the notes that I had, and this is just even you and I, when we talked about how we started our careers literally at very opposite ends. You started your career at the like literally the biggest contractor, in the world, I think, but still for the most part. Is that fair statement?
pretty close,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, you Bechtel. I mean, it's like one of the two, whatever. And I started, with a guy that was like had a part-time, contractor's license in a project, a guy named Wayne. I mean, so I started like stage zero, and you started up over at stage eight, right? So it's a bit different. And these are one of the so some of the notes that I made is like one of the things that changes is when you're kind of moving from stage one, two, three, four, you have a lot of emphasis on a kind of a general purpose, that they can do everything type of person, a go-getter. They're more of a generalist. They're not really focused on the process. They're focused on the outcomes. And then as you grow, you start to add in more and more specialist roles. You add in that person, probably by stage five, you've added in a contract specialist that they love contract clauses. They don't just
Right.
sort of know them. They haven't gotten burned just a few times. They actually have like a database, and they're very excited about different contract clauses and terms. And they study construction law for fun on the weekends and stuff like that. It's their hobby, and they're a specialist. But they're not going to fit in as good with the operator that's trying to get work and do work, because it's going to seem like they're kind of like this problem that's in between. And so so the culture, there's both a systems aspect of this, of who does what at what point in time, like responsibility matrix and a workflow diagram and things like that. But then there's a cultural dynamic that has to go with that, and this is where the leader, president, CEO, owner, whatever you want to call it, has to start to be intentional about changing the culture, because the same culture that made you very
Right.
successful in stage 1, 2, 3 about taking on some risks, being a great independent operator and things like that, you now have to shift the culture. Those things have to exist, but to a different degree. They have to exist within the system. So now the culture has to come around to being a really good team player, a really good integrator of different things. I have to be willing to sacrifice a little bit of me personally to hand the baton to you, and give you a better head start. So those are the things, some of the things that have to change in the culture, and a lot of change in culture comes down to communication, which you described. So those were, some of the notes that I had written down just as we were talking through that. And those are really hard changes, and oftentimes the leader that was, especially if it was a founder and moving through this stage, it becomes a bit uncomfortable for them. I was just having a meeting last
Yeah.
night with one, and he's like, man, this is gonna, and he's grown the business. He's been his own person for a long time, and he is looking for his next stage and his exit plan, and he's looking for a sale. He's like, I am going to need help learning how to play well with others. So because he knows that along with that sale, I mean, in the particular market that we've defined and how we've figured out what that sale is going to look like and the ideal buyer, he knows that he's going to have to work with 2 or 3 other really strong executives. He's brilliant and he's brilliant running the business for the size that it's at, and then he's got a definite strength in the area of strategy and especially the get work side. And so he's going to have to learn how to work with a really, really strong, CEO, COO, CFO,
Right.
surrounding him, and they'll be brilliant together. And he'll exit with tons of money, and his team will be happy and satisfied and growing. But at least he was recognizing. He's like, I know, Dave,
Yeah.
and
Well,
he's just
yeah, it's funny because working with a company as well, same kind of thing, right? Founders, uh, 2 founders. One is having that kind of that hard time. How am I going to play nice with others? And because their name's still on the door, uh, they're not quite as ready to leave as the other founder. The other founder is like, the company's in that guy's rearview mirror, right? He wants to make sure his payouts,
right, right,
there. But he's, worked through that, we'll talk more about, retirement masterpiece, but he's pretty much worked through that and kind of shifted his focus moving forward. Yeah, the other guy is still trying to figure out how do I play nice in this group, and how do I get people to not come in my door and ask a question when we have a new president, right?
yeah,
They need to do something. And actually in the building, I think they just added another door. So that there was at least a visual barrier to get to them so that,
yeah,
the new uh, leadership group could take over. So yeah, culture is tough to shift. And and a lot of times that founder got us here, but they also know that, I got us here. I
yeah,
need others to take us bigger and better. Um, but yeah, that can, one, be a little humbling. Two, you don't know what you don't know because you'd have been bigger if you could have been bigger. Um, and the culture very much is the founding culture, right? The founders culture. And
yes.
makes it hard when they are still there in some capacity and used to, they picked the paint color on the wall when they built the building.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And
it's
that's a great point you made about even just changing the physical space. I mean, there's lots of, you don't just sit down and changing a culture and changing habits is not about putting words on a wall and saying that these are
right.
our values and bringing in the painters to go change the paint on the walls. That's not it. It's about how people live and think about things every day. And it takes hundreds of little efforts to, just like that one you described, of like change the office layout a little bit, change the meeting rhythm a little bit.
Yep.
um, Maybe take a pause on some meetings for a period of time and let people get used to turning their heads to this leader or this group of leaders
Right.
or this report, so that something becomes that we're all looking at the same report together and we're looking at information to make decisions. We're not looking at a person to go make a decision. And those are all the little subtle changes that have to happen between stages 4 and 5 before we really move on to 6 plus. So at 6 plus, what does that look like? Because you've lived your contracting career in 6 plus, and we, now our goal is, helping contractors navigate these different stages of growth and get to 6 plus.
Yeah. Well, and I tell you, 6 plus is really in- inside 6 plus, everybody feels stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Mostly because you work on some smaller jobs, you work on some bigger jobs, you move to an area or a region. So you're feeling all of that as you go along. But I tell you, the 6 plus company, and I like this visual here because it shows, the arrows just kind of continually going around. That's really what it's all about. It is a very systematic way of looking at things, that I look at even the the CEO seat, right? Um, I don't know how most 6 plus companies work, but when I was there, it was a matter of a CEO was typically around for somewhere between 8 and 12 years. Uh, that had systematically been set up over time, because any less than that, and really you didn't have to eat your own cooking, right? you
Right.
you could have put policies or procedures into place, and it's like if they were going to fall apart, you needed to be there to see it. But if it got to be more than 10 or 12 years, the culture of the organization began to change to what that CEO liked. And so it really, because of and I don't want to call them short time spans, but the systems are set up that it's not about the specific individual.
Right.
The individual sits in the seat and the individual has a lot to do, but the system just continues to happen, really almost regardless of who's sitting in that seat, right? You're not going to come in and be CEO for 25 years again, because that would significantly change the culture of the organization. uh, they want a deliberate culture change, but it's kind of all of management says, hey, we're now going to focus on this for the next number of years. So it is about the systems, about the systems that continue to run, about the feedback that comes from those, making them better, um, and just the continual cycle of that, and then finding the right person, the right people to sit in those seats, right? Where are they good? What strengths do they bring to the table? And who can help make this round of this system that much better?
Right.
So yeah, but it is, and it doesn't have to be all that super formal. But there is, just like the words on the left say, right? There is governance, there is strategy, there is succession. Those things are just commonplace, right? They're common words. They're every year when we did business planning, we talked about who was retiring that year, how many people did we need for this year, next year, and the next year. We always had, our hiring 2 or 3 years out, knowing it wouldn't stay that way, but we were already planning on those big jobs that we knew we would be bidding through business development, right? They told us, here's the work coming up, and we wanted to build our bench. So that was just part of the system that started the conversation, right? The people still have to do the deciding, but the system really forces you into the timely the timeliness of the conversation at the right time of year or every couple years type of situation. So
I was thinking as you described that, and you said, you have, a rotation, almost a timeline, the right time span for the CEO of the organization, because it's a role like any other role,
mhm,
and that's an important thing in a lot of roles, is to make sure that you have any leadership role, to make sure that you probably have a rotation timeline. You're not rotating them out of the organization, maybe to a different role, but to make sure that they don't create little fiefdoms of culture and everything like that for yesterday.
right, right.
The other thing I was thinking about, as you were talking about this, is a meeting with, I had a lot of meetings yesterday. So I guess that's the joy of, it's one of the things that changes, right, as you go through those different stages of growth as a contractor, as you go from you're doing things, and then all of a sudden your life becomes like, when you're at stage 4 and 5 and 6, it's like, what'd you do? I had a really great day of meetings. Um,
Yeah.
oh, they were exciting meetings. People showed up. They were prepared. The agenda was there. We made these decisions. Anyway, just know that your work does change as you grow. But so I'm talking to this guy yesterday morning. Absolutely brilliant, early 30s, second generation business. He's firmly in the lead position now, and he's right in between, from a size wise, right in between stages 4 and 5. Realistically, it just, with his longevity, assuming he's going to continue growing, I have no reason to believe that they don't have all of the capabilities to get there, from the way that he's thinking about strategy and systems and people. And I mean, heck, he's thinking about governance at this point in time. So that gets to that thinking 2 stages ahead.
Right.
To right now, governance is an idea to him, and it's something that we'll start actively planning on probably a year or two from now. And then you were giving a description of governance, was just like, it was habit. Y'all didn't even really talk about like it was a system. It's not like you pulled out the checklist. It was just what you did. And
Right.
but it's one of the things I'm really working on with him, is knowing that he will be CEO well into the future, through stage 4, 5, and 6. He has to actually reinvent himself, even from some of the things that he did CEO at stage 3, where he was heavily involved in everything. He actually has to reinvent himself to be the right CEO for stage 4. So it'll still be the same person, same title, same everything. He has to reinvent himself. He has to
Mhm.
change how he allocates time. He has to change his behaviors. He has to change a lot of things. And then he's got to prepare to reinvent himself again for stage 5, and reinvent himself again for stage 6. So we're not talking about those things yet. We're just talking about the first reinvention.
Yeah, well, but it is interesting, right? Because but when we started talking today, one of the things that we will get to here in one of the next chats that we have is talking about those role transitions. And a lot of times in role transitions, we talk about people moving from one role to the next. This is staying in the same role and moving from one growth to the next, right?
Yep.
So that role transition is, yeah, the CEO you are at level 4 is not the same CEO you need to be at level 5. And a lot of that's just because it's pulling you up with it, and you can't do everything below you, right? As you're scaling, there's more people again that trust you. You got to hire the people, you
Yeah.
got to trust them to get the work done. So the yeah, role transitions go kind of uh, you know, side by side, but they go up in the
Right.
same role, and how that has to move. So that'll be an interesting discussion.
Yeah. That'll be a lot of fun. So with that, okay. So that's the leadership focus, and that we unpack that a little bit more this time than what we touched on last time.